The call to arms. In the heart of a galaxy teeming with life, a new terror had emerged from the unseen corners of space. It wasn't the might of a powerful weapon or the blitz of advanced technology that struck fear into the hearts of every civilization. No, it was something far more insidious. The Dominators, a species that no one had ever encountered before, had arrived. They came without warning, not to trade or negotiate, but to conquer with fear. The Dominators' ships were nothing like anything the galaxy had ever seen. They didn't rely on flashy weapons or advanced technology. No, their weapon was terror itself. Their black, sleek vessels would arrive in orbit around a planet, and for weeks, they would do nothing but broadcast the destruction of the world below, slowly and deliberately. The Dominators would bombard the surface, causing destruction not just to the world, but to the very spirit of the people who lived there. Every explosion, every moment of death, was shown on live feeds to every corner of the galaxy. It was their way of asserting power, not through victory in battle, but through the absolute horror of watching entire civilizations wither and die. The Galactic Council, an alliance of thousands of species, was helpless. Their fleets, advanced though they were, had been shattered trying to defend the first few worlds that fell to the Dominators. Their combined might, once a force capable of managing the galaxy's many threats, now seemed utterly insignificant. The Council members sat in silence, watching yet another planet burn on the massive holographic screen in front of them. It was the fourth world in a month. Admiral Corin, a tall, imposing figure from the ancient and wise Athelian species, stood at the head of the council, his gaze cold and distant as he surveyed the destruction. His mind raced, calculating the next moves, even though he knew they were unlikely to make a difference. The council chamber was filled with leaders from a dozen species, their faces pale with dread, their voices low with despair. How many more? One of the representatives from the mining colonies whispered, unable to tear his eyes away from the screen. Corin's voice was thick with frustration, his jaw set. As many as it takes for them to make their point, he said, his words heavy with the weight of truth. The Dominators had no end in sight. We've lost countless ships. Another voice chimed in, Admiral Voss, a veteran from the Tetum Alliance. 40 of the finest ships we had. We can't afford to keep sending ships into that slaughter. We're losing our fleets faster than we can replace them. The council room fell into a tense silence as the holographic display shifted, showing the explosion of the doomed planet. The final shockwave reached the outer edges of the system, wiping out the last of the planet's remaining structures. The haunting, endless echo of destruction reverberated through the chamber. We cannot allow this to continue, Corin finally spoke, breaking the silence. We have to find a way to stop them. But as he spoke, the realization settled heavily over the room. No one knew how. Their fleets were scattered and broken. The Dominion had shown they didn't care about victory in the traditional sense. They simply sought to instill fear in every civilization they encountered. And it was working. How long until they reached the center colonies? Corin demanded, turning toward the tactical officer. 4 days, the officer replied grimly, his fingers flying over the console. They've already changed course. They set a direct path toward the center system. At this rate, they'll be there in 4 days. Send the warning to Earth, Corin ordered. They need to know what's coming. But in his heart, he knew it wouldn't matter. The Earth was just as unprepared as everyone else. A species barely emerging from their own primitive state, unable to match the technological might of the other galactic species. They had no chance of stopping the Dominators. But there was something the Council didn't know. Something hidden from their eyes, lurking beneath the surface of the quiet planet Earth. While the galaxy's most advanced species had watched in horror, the humans had been quietly preparing. Far from the Council's reach, beyond the watchful eyes of alien surveillance, Earth's greatest secret was about to be unleashed. Hidden beneath Jupiter's icy moon, Ganymede, a massive construction yard lay dormant, its vast expanse concealed from prying sensors. Here, Humanity had poured every ounce of its ingenuity and strength into a singular goal: to build a weapon that could defy the Dominion. Admiral John Miller, an experienced veteran of Earth's space defense forces, stood alone in a control room that overlooked the massive shipyards. His face, weathered by time and war, reflected the cold light of the artificial sun as it shone down on the assembly line of a ship like no other. The humans had been studying the Dominion for years now. They had been intercepting their communications, observing their tactics, and learning from their mistakes. And now, after years of careful preparation, humanity's first true warship was ready to launch. The Titan's Wrath was no ordinary vessel. It was designed not to match the Dominion ship for ship in terms of firepower, but to exploit their greatest weakness, their reliance on fear. Status report. Admiral Miller's voice rang out, breaking the silence in the control room. Admiral, the Titan's Wrath is 98.4% complete, came the calm response from his second-in-command, Captain Robert West. All weapons are operational, and the final drive system is undergoing its last calibration. The crew has completed their training simulations with a 94% success rate. Miller nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. It had taken everything Earth had to build this ship: every country, every government, every military. The entire human race had come together, united by a singular cause: to protect their home. "Show me the latest Dominator attack," Miller ordered, his voice steady but tinged with anticipation. On the massive display in front of him, the images of the latest destroyed world appeared, showing the wreckage and devastation left by the Dominators. Miller studied it carefully, as he had done countless times before, but now it felt different. Humanity was about to face the threat head-on. "They're all about the show," Captain West said, his sharp eyes narrowing as he watched the images. Big explosions, dramatic pauses, always broadcasting their destruction to sow fear. Miller's smile widened slightly, but they've never faced a species that makes fear their entertainment. And that, he believed, was where humanity would find its edge. As the Titan's Wrath powered up, its engines humming to life, Admiral Miller's thoughts turned toward the coming battle. The Dominators had no idea what they were about to face. Fear had no place in the hearts of humans, and that was something the Dominion would soon learn. The heart of the storm. In the shadows of the mighty shipyards, hidden beneath Jupiter's moon Ganymede, the Titan's Wrath slowly powered up. The massive warship, built from every ounce of human ingenuity and ambition, stood poised like a giant about to rise from slumber. Its sleek, angular hull shimmered in the dim light of the artificial sun, but for all of its grandeur, there was a quiet tension within the ship's metal skeleton. This was humanity's last, best hope. Admiral John Miller paced through the ship's command center, his boots echoing off the polished floors. His face was set, eyes sharp with a quiet intensity that could cut through the mounting uncertainty. The holographic displays in front of him flickered, showing real-time intelligence reports, maps of the galaxy, and the latest coordinates of the Dominator fleet. His hand hovered over the control console, fingers ready to give the order that would set the course for everything. "We're ready, Admiral," Captain Robert West's voice broke the silence. He stood by a large viewport, watching the ship's final preparations unfold outside. The Titan's Wrath is fully operational. The final test runs were a success. We'll be ready to launch in T-2 hours. Miller's eyes narrowed as he stared at the holographic display showing the Dominator fleet's movements. The cold black ships of the Dominators were already closing in on the center colonies, the nearest human settlements to Earth. Time was running out, 4 days at best. That was all they had before the Dominion would reach the heart of the colonies and wipe out billions of innocent lives. "Tell the crew to prepare for launch," Miller said, his voice low but firm. "We have no more time to waste." Captain West gave a sharp nod, relaying the order to the crew. The bustling hum of activity in the control room grew louder as the crew began their final checks. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers all moved with quiet urgency, understanding that this wasn't just another mission. This was the beginning of humanity's fight for its place in the galaxy. On the far side of the galaxy, within the dark reaches of space, the Dominion fleet made its slow, deliberate approach toward the center system. The black ships were ominous, sleek, and cold, imposing in their silence. Each ship radiated an aura of dread that seemed to warp the very fabric of space around them. As always, they broadcasted their path, their purpose, to bring terror to every corner of the galaxy. The center colonies, a lush world teeming with life, were defenseless. A peaceful people, they had no military force strong enough to fight back. They had relied on the protection of the Galactic Council, but the Council's fleets had already been decimated by the Dominators. The center people would be next, just another casualty in the Dominion's campaign of fear. But what the Dominators didn't know was that this time, the humans had been preparing in secret. The Titan's Wrath was a ship unlike anything they had ever faced, a ship that was both the pinnacle of human ingenuity and a symbol of humanity's refusal to be cowed by terror. In the vast open void between the two forces, the Titan's Wrath slipped into position, hidden in the dark shadows of an asteroid belt. The ship's advanced cloaking systems made it invisible to even the most sophisticated alien sensors. A few hours of silence passed. Then, as the Dominator fleet drew nearer, the Titan's Wrath came to life. Admiral Miller stood at the command console, his fingers steady and sure as he activated the ship's first systems. The engines rumbled to life with a deep, resonating pulse. The hum of energy surging through the hull reverberated across the ship like a beating heart, ready to strike. "Are we ready?" Miller asked, glancing at Captain West, who had taken his position next to the tactical officer. "Ready as we'll ever be," West replied with a nod. "Weapon systems are online. The point defense system is fully operational. The AI is synced and ready for the fight. All we need is the order." Miller's gaze flicked to the star map on the display. The Dominator fleet was closing in, each ship moving with calculated precision. The time for subtlety was over. The time for fear was over. "Open a channel to the Dominion," Miller ordered. "Let them know we're here." Across the galaxy, in the cold heart of the Dominator flagship, Lord Malrak, commander of the Dominion fleet, sat on his throne of blackened bone, staring at the galaxy's projections displayed in front of him. His pale grey skin gleamed in the dim red lighting of his ship. The symbols of terror, which had once brought entire civilizations to their knees, now seemed almost ritualistic in their presentation. Each world they conquered added to his dark legacy. He was the harbinger of destruction, the bringer of fear. But something was different now. His communications officer's voice pierced through his reverie. "Lord Malrak, there is an incoming transmission. It's from a human vessel." Malrak's lips curled into a dark smile. The humans had no true military force to speak of. The idea of them sending a ship to confront the mighty Dominion was laughable. "Let it through," he growled. "I wish to hear this foolishness." Back aboard the Titan's Wrath, the transmission went live. Miller stood before the main screen, his eyes narrowed as he stared directly into the cold, empty void where the Dominion's fleet waited. "This is Admiral John Miller of the United Earth Defense Fleet." Miller's voice boomed across the void, his words steady and calm. "I am speaking directly to Lord Malrak of the Dominion. Your campaign of terror ends here. We will not bow to fear. Humanity has been watching, and we are prepared to defend our people." There was a long silence on the other side as the Dominion fleet's commanders processed the audacity of the human message. Lord Malrak's laugh echoed across the bridge of his flagship, a sound that chilled the bones of every officer under his command. "Humans," Malrak's voice crackled through the communication line, dripping with disdain. "You are insignificant. Your species is barely more than a spark in the vast dark of space. You will be crushed like the insects you are." Miller didn't flinch. He had heard this before. Every invader, every conqueror, had underestimated humanity's resolve. "You can try," Miller replied coldly. But you will find that humans do not break as easily as you think. The transmission was cut off, and the battle lines were drawn. The Dominion had no idea what they were about to face. They thought fear was their weapon of choice. But humanity had its own weapon, an ancient force that no one in the galaxy could predict: determination. The Titan's wrath powered up fully. The battle for the center colonies was about to begin. As the Titan's wrath began its slow, deliberate approach toward the Dominion fleet, the heart of the storm was about to open. And this time, the humans weren't just survivors of the terror, they were the storm itself. A clash of wills. The Titan's wrath emerged from the asteroid belt, its silhouette breaking through the darkness like a shadow from a forgotten legend. The vastness of space stretched out around it, cold and indifferent, but inside the massive warship, the air was thick with anticipation. For the first time in centuries, humanity had a weapon capable of changing the balance of power in the galaxy. Admiral John Miller stood tall in the command center, his eyes locked onto the massive holo display, watching as the Dominion fleet continued its slow, methodical advance toward the center colonies. His face was stoic, but there was a fire in his gaze. A fire that had been ignited in the very bones of humanity for generations. Targeting systems online, Captain Robert West said from his post, his voice calm but laced with urgency. Weapons fully primed. We're in position. Good, Miller replied, his voice unwavering. Prepare for full engagement. Let's show them what humanity is capable of. On the bridge of the Dominator flagship, Lord Malrak watched the human vessel approach. His pale fingers rested on the console in front of him, a gesture of confidence that belied the unease growing deep in his chest. He had expected the humans to cower, to beg for mercy like every other species he had crushed under the Dominion's heel. But this was different. Bring up the human ship, Malrak ordered, his voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and disdain. Let me see this foolhardy vessel up close. A large screen in front of him flickered to life, showing the Titan's wrath in all its terrifying glory. It was nothing like the primitive ships the humans had used in their past wars. Its sleek, angular design suggested an advanced technology, far beyond the simple military equipment he had anticipated. There was an eerie calm about it, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Such arrogance, Malrak muttered to himself. They believe they can stand against the might of the Dominion. They will learn the hard way that their species is nothing more than a fleeting spark. He turned to his fleet commanders. Prepare the fleet for full assault. We shall crush this human ship, as we have crushed so many before. Target their engines first, then their weapons. Make sure they understand their place in the galaxy. The officers around him nodded, but there was an undercurrent of unease in their eyes. The humans were unpredictable. Their tactics, their resilience, their ability to adapt under pressure. They had already proven that they were unlike any species the Dominion had faced. But Malrak had no intention of backing down. Fire when ready, he commanded. Back aboard the Titan's wrath, the tension in the command center was palpable. The crew moved with military precision, their eyes fixed on their stations, their hands moving in synchrony as the ship's weapon systems powered up. Miller stood at the helm, his fingers hovering over the control panels, his thoughts focused on the task ahead. Admiral, Dr. Anna White, the ship's lead engineer, said as she entered the command center, her voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. All systems are running at optimal levels. The AI is ready for full engagement. The new point defense algorithms are active. We'll be able to intercept most incoming fire, but I suggest we stay mobile. The Dominator fleet won't hesitate to send everything they have at us. Miller nodded, his gaze never leaving the holo display. I know. We'll fight smart. Our edge is speed and adaptability. We're not here to win in a head-to-head battle. We're here to survive long enough to make a difference. The ship's tactical officer spoke up, his voice cutting through the tension. Admiral, the Dominator fleet is in range. They're targeting our main engines. We've expected this, Miller said, his voice calm but firm. All hands, brace for impact. Engage evasive maneuvers on my mark. The crew braced themselves, feeling the hum of energy as the Titan's Wrath shifted position, moving swiftly to dodge the first volley of incoming fire. The Dominion fleet's weapons lit up the darkness of space, sending beams of concentrated energy hurtling toward the human vessel. But the Titan's Wrath was faster, its maneuverability far superior to the bulky, slow-moving ships of the Dominion. The first barrage of fire missed, the energy blasts flashing past them like shooting stars. Miller's fingers danced across the console as he issued commands, the ship shifting again, gliding through space with the grace of a predator on the hunt. Deploy countermeasures, Miller ordered. Activate the deflector shields. As the ship swerved again, the shields flared to life, absorbing the next wave of energy beams. A low hum filled the command center as the ship's engines roared, pushing the warship even further from the incoming fire. But they couldn't avoid the inevitable forever. The Dominators would adapt, and soon, the battle would become a deadly game of cat and mouse. Prepare to return fire, Miller ordered. Get the targeting systems online. We'll show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. On the Dominator flagship, Malrak watched in growing frustration as the human ship continued to evade his attacks. His fleet was vast, his weapons powerful, yet the Titan's Wrath danced through the firestorm with an agility that left him baffled. Why aren't they burning? He growled to his fleet commanders. Why aren't they crumbling under the might of our weapons? They're adapting, my lord, one of the officers replied. Their ship is moving too quickly. It's using its shields in unconventional ways. They seem to have an answer to every move we make. Malrak's eyes narrowed. Then let's make sure they don't have time to think. We'll overwhelm them with sheer force. He turned to his weapons officer. Send everything we've got. I want their ship torn to pieces. Back aboard the Titan's Wrath, the human crew was working at maximum capacity. Every member of the team was operating in perfect synchronization, driven by the knowledge that their survival depended on the smallest of margins. Every second counted. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Admiral, West said urgently, his voice tight with concentration. They're going to launch a full assault. We can't keep dodging forever. We need to hit them back, hard. Do it, Miller replied without hesitation. The crew's fingers flew across the control panels, targeting the Dominator fleet with pinpoint accuracy. In an instant, the Titan's Wrath unleashed its full arsenal. Missiles, plasma cannons, and energy beams rained down upon the Dominion ships. The first wave of fire was precise, focused on key weak points in the Dominion's ships, engines, shields, and communication arrays. One by one, Dominator ships began to explode, their massive forms disintegrating in fiery clouds of debris. The human ship's accuracy was breathtaking, and the impact was immediate. We're hitting them, sir, the tactical officer reported. Their shields are faltering. We've taken out their lead ship. Miller allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before turning his attention back to the fight. The battle was far from over, but this was the first real blow the Dominion had taken in years. This is only the beginning, he said quietly. We fight for our future. And as the Dominion fleet reeled from the first wave of counterattacks, it became clear. Humanity was no longer just a victim. They were becoming the storm. The human spirit awakens. The stars were silent witnesses to the war unfolding in their midst. On one side, the immense and unrelenting Dominion fleet, powerful and seemingly invincible, surged through the void. On the other, the Titan's Wrath, a single human ship, now engaged in a struggle that would determine the fate of billions. Admiral John Miller stood on the bridge, his face a mask of focus and determination. The battle had turned in humanity's favor, just slightly, but the Dominion wasn't going to give up easily. They'd learned from their mistakes and were adapting. The next phase of the fight would be even more brutal. They're regrouping, Captain Robert West reported, his voice calm but carrying an edge of concern. They're pulling back to form a tighter formation, It's almost as if they're learning. Miller didn't flinch. His eyes scanned the massive holoscreen, which displayed the Dominion fleet realigning itself into an even more menacing formation. "Let them learn," he said, his voice steady. "We'll give them something to really learn from." The Dominion's retaliation. Lord Malrak stood at the center of his war room, watching the devastating impact of the human counterattack. The Titan's wrath had struck hard, destroying several key ships in the front line. His officers around him were nervous, their faces betraying the tension in the air. The human ship was proving more formidable than they had ever anticipated. "I told you they would be difficult to predict," Malrak growled, his voice low but filled with fury. "These humans are unlike any species we've encountered. They're resourceful and unpredictable, but they'll soon learn that no one can stand against the Dominion." He turned to his weapons officer. "Increase firepower. Use the quantum disruptors on their engines. We'll take away their mobility." The officer nodded and turned to the console, tapping commands with practiced precision. The massive, dark ships of the Dominion shifted positions, their guns glowing ominously as they locked onto their target, the Titan's Wrath. Miller's resolve. Back on the Titan's Wrath, the crew was in a heightened state of alert. Every minute, every second counted. The warning lights flashed red as the Dominion's weapons powered up, and Miller could feel the pressure mounting. But there was no panic in his heart. This was the moment he prepared for. "Admiral," Dr. Anna White called out, her fingers flying across her console. "The quantum disruptors are incoming. They'll disable our engines if they hit. We need to outrun them." Miller glanced at the holo display, where the Dominion ships were already adjusting their fire trajectory. He could see it now, the deadly beams of energy building up, poised to strike. "Time to show them what we're made of," Miller said, his voice steely. "Evasive maneuvers, now." The Titan's Wrath surged forward, pushing its engines to the limit. The ship's hull groaned under the stress as it shot through the void, narrowly dodging the incoming energy blasts. The crew braced themselves, their hearts pounding as the ship twisted and turned with incredible speed. "Activate the secondary thrusters," Miller barked. "We need to throw them off balance." The ship's engines rolled to life, flames spitting from their exhaust ports as they burned hot with fury. The Titan's Wrath zigzagged in an unpredictable pattern, forcing the Dominion ships to adjust their targeting systems at a frantic pace. For a moment, it seemed like the entire galaxy held its breath. Would the Titan's Wrath survive this onslaught? Human ingenuity in the face of adversity. Inside the command center, Miller's mind was a whirl of calculations, adjustments, and split-second decisions. It wasn't just his life at stake. There were billions of lives across Earth and the center colonies depending on him. "I have an idea," Dr. White said, looking up from her console. "We can overload their disruptor beams with a counterpulse from our energy grid. It'll be risky, extremely risky, but it might just work." Miller turned to her, his brow furrowed. "Explain it." "We'll sync the energy grid to fire a pulse just as the disruptor beams are about to engage our engines," she explained. "It won't block the blast, but it will divert the energy in a way that it can't sustain the quantum field long enough to disable our systems." There was no hesitation in Miller's voice. "Do it. Make it happen." The crew scrambled, their hands moving like lightning as they keyed in the commands. The ship's energy grid hummed with anticipation, and Miller's heart raced. For a brief moment, everything felt as though it was suspended in time. Then the Dominion fired. The quantum disruptors screamed across the void, their energy beams vibrating the very fabric of space. And just as the beams reached the Titan's Wrath, the counterpulse was unleashed. The ship's energy grid flared with an unnatural brilliance, and for a heartbeat, the entire bridge was bathed in a harsh white light. The beams of the disruptors flared wildly and dissipated, as though they'd hit an invisible force. The Titan's Wrath remained untouched, its engines roaring with the power of 1,000 storms. "We did it," Dr. White exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief. were still operational. Miller let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Nice work, Doc. Now let's take the fight to them." The tide turns. The Titan's wrath wasn't just surviving anymore. It was fighting back with a fury that made the Dominion fleet recoil. For the first time since the war had begun, the tables were turning. "Admiral," West reported, "we're in range to strike back at their command ship. If we hit it, we might be able to cripple their entire fleet." "Take the shot," Miller ordered without hesitation. The ship's guns hummed as they powered up, locking onto the central command ship of the Dominion fleet. With deadly accuracy, the Titan's wrath fired a concentrated plasma blast, striking the command ship in its vulnerable underbelly. The ship shuddered as the blast tore through its defenses, disabling key systems. "Direct hit," the tactical officer shouted. "We've crippled their command ship." Malrak's flagship flickered in the distance, but it wasn't going down easily. Malrak himself could be seen on the command deck, his face twisting with a mixture of rage and disbelief. This cannot be happening," Malrak muttered. "How is this possible?" He turned to his fleet commanders. "Regroup. We're not done yet. We will show them the true power of the Dominion." But inside the Titan's wrath, the crew felt a shift, a moment of hope, like a light in the darkness. The tide of the battle had turned, and the human spirit had shown its true power. Against all odds, humanity was proving that it could stand against even the greatest forces in the galaxy. And as the Titan's wrath prepared for the next wave of battle, one thing was clear. Humanity had not only survived, they had started to win. The final gamble. The Titan's wrath sailed through the darkness of space like a vengeful shadow, its engines still roaring with unrelenting power. The battle raged around them, a chaotic symphony of destruction that seemed to echo across the vastness of the galaxy. But inside the ship, Admiral Miller was calm. The crew was focused. They knew the time had come to end this once and for all. "Admiral," Captain West called, his voice steady, "we're running low on ammo for the main guns. The Dominion's command ship is still in range, but our shields won't hold up much longer against their full assault." Miller turned, his sharp gaze locking onto the tactical screen. The Dominion fleet, though crippled, was far from broken. The central command ship, now heavily damaged but still functional, had managed to rally its remaining forces. The larger Dominion warships moved into a protective formation around it, preparing for a final decisive push. "We don't need the guns," Miller said, his voice filled with cold determination. "We're going to do this the human way." The human advantage. Dr. Anna White stood at the console, her fingers flying over the holographic keys. "Admiral, I've been analyzing their fleet. The Dominion is strong, but they've made a critical error. Their ships rely on a centralized command system. If we take down their flagship, we can destabilize the entire fleet." Miller nodded slowly, his mind racing. "I've been thinking the same thing. The Titan's wrath isn't just a warship, it's a message, a statement." Captain West looked at him, brow furrowed. "What are you suggesting, sir?" Miller stepped forward, locking eyes with each of them. "We don't need to defeat them in a traditional sense. We need to break their will. They thrive on fear, and they think they've instilled that fear in us. We're going to show them how wrong they are." A bold strategy. The crew worked quickly, implementing the plan with a precision born of desperation and ingenuity. Dr. White coordinated with the engineers, using the ship's energy reserves to generate a massive EMP pulse. The pulse would short-circuit the Dominion flagship's communication systems, severing its connection to the rest of the fleet. The Titan's wrath would be vulnerable during the operation, but they had no other choice. "We have one shot at this," Dr. White said, her voice tight with anticipation. "Once we fire the EMP, their fleet will be thrown into disarray, but we'll have no way of knowing how much time we'll have before they regain control." "We'll make it count," Miller replied. The EMP strike. As the Titan's wrath closed in on the Dominion flagship, the tension in the air was palpable. The crew knew what was at stake. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and their gamble would cost them everything. "Admiral, we're in range," West said, his fingers hovering over the command controls. "Ready when you are." Miller's eyes scanned the battlefield. The Dominion ships had begun to concentrate their fire on the Titan's wrath, but the ship's shields were holding, barely. "Fire the EMP," Miller ordered. In that moment, a flash of light erupted from the Titan's wrath, a blinding pulse of electromagnetic energy that surged toward the Dominion flagship. Time seemed to stretch, and for a brief instant, the entire universe held its breath. Then, the wave of energy slammed into the flagship, and everything changed. Chaos among the Dominion. On board the Dominion flagship, Lord Malrak stood in shock as his ship's systems began to flicker and fail. The communication channels went silent, and his officers scrambled to assess the damage. The EMP had severed the flagship's connection to the rest of the fleet, leaving the Dominion ships without leadership. Chaos erupted across their ranks. "What is this?" Malrak roared, his voice filled with disbelief. "Get our systems online, now." But it was too late. The human ship had already done its damage. Without the flagship to coordinate the assault, the remaining Dominion warships were left stranded, vulnerable. Miller watched with cold satisfaction as the Dominion fleet's once cohesive formation began to unravel. Ships hesitated, turned in circles, or drifted aimlessly, their once deadly weapon systems now useless without proper orders. "This is it," Miller said quietly. "We've broken them." The turning point. The Titan's wrath fired again, this time with devastating precision. The shot slammed into a nearby Dominion destroyer, tearing through its hull. Without the command of their flagship, the Dominion fleet was in complete disarray. The human ship, battered but alive, continued its assault, picking off the remaining Dominion vessels one by one. "This isn't over yet," Captain West warned. "We still have to finish the job." "Agreed," Miller said, his gaze fixed on the damaged Dominion flagship. "We'll take the command ship down now. For good." A desperate last stand. But as the Titan's wrath moved in for the final blow, the remaining Dominion ships made one last, desperate stand. They surged forward with a vengeance, attempting to regroup around their flagship in a final attempt to defend it. The Titan's wrath wasn't ready to back down. With the EMP causing mayhem in the Dominion's command systems, the crew knew the enemy was vulnerable. They could smell victory in the air, and they weren't about to let it slip away. Miller's voice rang out on the bridge. "All power to forward weapons. We end this now." The Titan's wrath surged forward, its weapons locked onto the command ship. In a final, glorious display of human determination, the Titan's wrath unleashed a barrage of plasma energy directly into the Dominion flagship. The blasts tore through its hull, causing massive explosions. Lord Malrak watched as his flagship shuddered, unable to comprehend the destruction unfolding before him. "No, this cannot be the end," he whispered. The flagship erupted in a series of catastrophic explosions. The light from the blasts lit up the void of space as the massive ship shattered into 1,000 pieces, sending shockwaves through the Dominion fleet. Victory in the stars. With their command ship destroyed, the remaining Dominion forces scattered. The Titan's wrath had accomplished the impossible. The Dominion, once the most fearsome fleet in the galaxy, had been defeated by a single human ship. Miller stood on the bridge, staring out into the empty space where the Dominion fleet had once been. "We did it," he said quietly, his voice full of disbelief. "We did," West replied, a grin spreading across his face. But as they celebrated their victory, the reality of the moment settled in. This was just the beginning. The galaxy had changed forever. Humanity had proven that it could face the impossible and rise above it. But as the stars stretched out before them, there was still much work to be done. The Titan's wrath was now a symbol, not just of humanity's victory over the Dominion, but of the ultimate power that the human spirit could wield. And as the crew of the Titan's wrath prepared for whatever lay ahead, they knew one thing for certain: Humanity would never be the same again. The universe had learned to fear them. A new dawn in the galaxy. The silence in the aftermath of the battle was deafening. The Titan's wrath drifted through the stars, its once glorious hull now marred by the scars of battle. The Dominion fleet was no more, scattered across the vast emptiness of space in pieces that would never threaten the galaxy again. Yet, despite their victory, the crew aboard the Titan's wrath knew the true battle was just beginning. Admiral Miller stood alone in the observation deck, staring out at the field of wreckage that had once been the mighty Dominion fleet. The stars twinkled in the distance, cold and indifferent, but to him, they had never felt more alive. He could sense the weight of history pressing down on him, the weight of what they had accomplished, and what they still had to do. "Admiral," Captain West's voice broke through the stillness. "We've secured the remnants of the Dominion fleet. The remaining ships are surrendering. Their leaders, they're already begging for terms." Miller turned, his expression solemn. "Surrender is easy when your empire is shattered, but it doesn't change what's coming next." West nodded. "The Council will want us to accept their terms, to bring peace to the galaxy." "They'll get their peace," Miller replied, his voice firm, "but not the kind they expect. The human voice in a galaxy of silence. The Dominion's destruction had left a power vacuum in its wake, and in the absence of any dominant force, the galaxy's many factions would be left to pick up the pieces. The question was no longer whether the Dominion would reign, but who would claim that power now. "We can't let that happen," Miller said, more to himself than to West. "We can't let the same thing happen again. We've seen what fear can do to this galaxy. We've seen how easily it's used to manipulate others. Humanity will make sure that doesn't happen." West leaned in. "You're suggesting we build an alliance? A new order?" Miller's eyes narrowed. "Not just an alliance. A new foundation. One where fear isn't the weapon. Where the power of a species isn't defined by how much destruction they can cause, but by how much they can build. The Titan's wrath may have been the ship that stopped the Dominion, but humanity will be the force that keeps the galaxy from falling back into chaos." The rise of the human coalition. Back on Earth, the news of the Titan's wrath's victory was met with both awe and caution. Governments, military leaders, and civilians alike were still processing the fact that humanity, once just a fledgling species on the edge of space, had just brought down the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. But Miller knew that victory could breed complacency, and that the greatest threat now wasn't the Dominion, it was what would come next. "We've earned our place in the galaxy," Miller said, as he addressed the United Earth Council. "But we're not done. This is the beginning of something new. We will not repeat the mistakes of the past. We will not use fear as a weapon. We will use cooperation, diplomacy, and strength of character. We will form a coalition where humanity will lead by example." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The Titan's wrath was a tool, but humanity itself is what will keep the peace. A bridge between worlds. Over the following weeks, the Titan's wrath became a symbol of unity. Miller and his crew traveled across the galaxy, meeting with representatives from various species, factions, and races. The human message was clear: no more fear, no more terror. The galaxy needed a new foundation, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and the strength to face whatever came next together. "We are not the conquerors you fear," Miller told a gathering of alien leaders, "but the partners you need." Dr. White and Captain West worked tirelessly, setting up communication lines, conducting peace talks, and forging alliances with species that had once seen humanity as insignificant. Slowly, the coalition began to take shape. It wasn't just humanity's strength that was winning allies, it was their vision. A vision of a galaxy where fear wasn't the driving force, where power was measured by the capacity to build, create, and protect, not destroy. The unlikely allies. But as humanity extended its hand, there were still those who were skeptical. Old enemies, such as the Kreshkar, a reptilian race known for their fierce territorialism, remained hostile. They didn't trust humanity's rise to power, and many saw it as a threat to their own dominance. Tensions were high, and Miller knew that not every species would be eager to join the human-led coalition. However, the Titans' Wrath's success had already changed the galaxy's dynamics. The Kreshkar were now forced to reckon with humanity's new influence, and their refusal to participate in the coalition was seen by many as a sign of weakness, not strength. "They'll come around," Captain West said, looking over a tactical map of the galaxy. "It might take time, but no one wants to be on the outside when the future is being built." The price of peace. Despite the growing coalition, Miller knew peace wouldn't come easily. The galaxy was vast, with deep-seated rivalries and ancient grudges. The Dominion's fall had left a power vacuum, and there were those who were already plotting to fill it, whether through diplomacy or war. "The price of peace is never small," Miller muttered, staring out at the stars once more. "But it's worth paying." Dr. White approached, her tablet in hand. "The new defense systems are almost ready. We'll need them. There are whispers of a new threat on the horizon. The Dominion might be gone, but their influence still lingers." Miller looked out the window, his expression hardened. "We'll be ready. We have to be." A new era begins. The Titan's Wrath continued to patrol the edges of known space, a beacon of humanity's resolve. In every corner of the galaxy, the message was spreading: the Age of Fear was over. In its place, a new era of collaboration was beginning. Humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, but they also showed what they valued most: peace, resilience, and the ability to forge a better future. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: humanity's role in the galaxy was no longer one of fear and subjugation. It was a role of leadership, of hope, and of inspiration. As the Titan's Wrath disappeared into the stars, heading toward the next frontier, Admiral Miller couldn't help but smile. The war had ended, but the real adventure was just beginning.